Network administrators often build towering digital boundaries, assuming the assets inside are safe. But a thick outer shell cannot secure a completely undefended interior. To understand where the actual vulnerabilities lie, we have to look at the standard layout of a corporate network. This architecture is typically split into two distinct zones: the public-facing Wide Area Network, or WAN, and the private Local Area Network, the LAN. The boundary between these zones is guarded by an edge firewall, acting as the primary gatekeeper. It sits at the edge, monitoring incoming and outgoing traffic. It evaluates packets against strict rules, selectively allowing or dropping data before it reaches internal devices. This firewall usually works alongside Network Address Translation, or NAT, a protocol that manages IP routing between your private internal network and the public internet. NAT and the edge firewall form an efficient partnership to filter external traffic and block unauthorized internet requests from crossing the threshold. Yet they share a critical limitation. Their focus is pointed entirely outward. Relying exclusively on this setup creates a dangerous perimeter illusion. You are left with a hardened outer shell, protecting a completely soft, trusting interior network. Curious, so what happens if an attacker doesn't try to break through that perimeter, but instead gains physical or logical access directly to the LAN? Once inside, the dynamic changes completely. A compromised internal node can begin communicating directly with adjacent devices on the local network to establish multiple footholds. During this lateral spread, the edge firewall is entirely blind. Because the malicious traffic never attempts to cross the boundary out to the WAN, the gatekeeper is never triggered. This internal spread is highly effective because standard local area network protocols were engineered to prioritize operational efficiency and automation, not security. Essential protocols handling device configuration, like DHCP, or network management, like SNMP and LDAP, operate on an inherent assumption of trust for any local request. To prevent a single compromised device from taking down an entire system, network administrators must assume the edge is already breached. The focus has to shift toward hardening internal Layer 2 switches and restricting those automated protocols. The most direct way to bypass an edge firewall is right inside the building, plugging a rogue device directly into an unused physical switch port. By default, unconfigured switch ports are trusting. They allow any connected device to immediately join the network, giving an attacker an instant vector to capture traffic or release malware. Mitigating this requires applying our first hardening technique, Layer 2 port security. It works by explicitly binding authorized MAC addresses to designated physical ports. If an unrecognized MAC address attempts to connect, the switch identifies the violation and immediately shuts down that port. To close the remaining physical loopholes, administrators must explicitly disable all unused switch ports, eliminating any dark access points sitting empty in conference rooms or lobbies. Building security is not network security. Every physical access point must be locked down with strict hardware-level authentication. Once the physical layer is secured, the next major vulnerability lies in logical threats, specifically the automated protocols devices use to configure themselves. DHCP operates over UDP ports 67 and 68 to automate the assignment of IP addresses to new devices. The flaw here is speed over verification. A client sending a request blindly trusts and accepts parameters from the first server that responds. On the local network can deploy their own rogue DHCP server. When a client broadcasts a request, the rogue server races the legitimate server, firing back a malicious response packet to beat the authentic one. If the rogue packet arrives first, the attacker assigns their own machine as the client's default gateway. The target's outbound traffic is now silently routed through the attacker, establishing a seamless man-in-the-middle exploit. To stop this routing hijack, administrators deploy a countermeasure known as DHCP snooping. DHCP snooping configures the switch to distinguish between trusted and untrusted ports. It designates the specific port connected to the legitimate DHCP server as trusted and actively inspects and blocks DHCP responses originating from all other untrusted ports. Operational automation is essential for modern networks, but it has to be constrained by strict trust boundaries to prevent internal routing from being weaponized. The very tools and interfaces administrators use to manage these network defenses present their own critical attack surfaces if left misconfigured. Network devices often ship with default configuration files, including default administrative credentials right out of the box. Attackers scan the network to alter traffic rules. Even with strong passwords, remote management protocols introduce another layer of risk, particularly the Simple Network Management Protocol, SNMP, operating on UDP ports 161 and 162. Older versions of SNMP and unencrypted LDAP transmit their management data entirely in plaintext. An attacker with lateral movement can deploy a packet sniffer to monitor local traffic, extracting administrative passwords right out of the air. Securing this layer requires a strict upgrade to Secure SNMP, or SNMP version 3, which encrypts the data stream. Furthermore, all device configuration backups stored on the network must be heavily encrypted to prevent passive theft. Administrative convenience quickly becomes a severe liability if management protocols aren't rigorously updated, encrypted, and monitored. Resilience in network security comes from a matrix of interlocking protocols and physical controls, rather than reliance on a single appliance. We can visualize this as a defense in-depth model, building outward from the data core. The first internal layer addresses management. This includes rotating default passwords and enforcing encrypted communication through SNMP v3. The next layer establishes Layer 2 controls. These measures restrict physical access via port security and close automated loopholes with DHCP snooping. The final ring is the edge perimeter. Firewalls and VPNs function as the initial screening layer, now backed by the internal safeguards protecting the core. This defense in-depth matrix ensures that if an attacker bypasses the edge, their lateral movement is obstructed by the hardware-level verification and trusted port requirements of the internal network. A network is only as secure as its most vulnerable internal configuration. Proactive hardening transforms a fragile perimeter into a resilient environment designed to isolate and identify threats before they spread.